Hi, in this video we'll be looking at some factors which affect depreciation and indeed the depreciation charge that we record in our accounts. So in the previous video or two we looked at actually defining what we meant by depreciation, why we do it and where we record it, and we looked at some things that will cause depreciation. So I won't go back through all of those details, but just following on from that video, we've got a few key factors that the depreciation charge, so what we record to our accounts, and what will cause this to vary. For when are we going to have a high depreciation charge for an asset, and when are we going to have a low depreciation charge? So we've got three key factors which will affect depreciation. The first one is going to be the cost of the asset itself. So let's imagine for a second that we're depreciating a percentage of the value of our asset. It seems to make sense that, say, if we have a car, each year it's going to decrease in value by, say, 10% or 20% or whatever we define this percentage to be. Well, if our car is more expensive, it will have a higher depreciation charge, should I say. So if we have, say, a £200,000 Mercedes, and if we were to depreciate this by 10% each year, well, this is going to be a £20,000 depreciation charge. Whereas if we were to, say, have a £10,000 car, let's, for argument's sake, say this is a Vauxhall, well, clearly 10% of this, we're only going to have a £1,000 depreciation charge. So the depreciation charge is going to vary based on the cost of the asset. And in the previous video, we looked at some factors affecting the cost. So clearly, in this car example, we've looked at, say, the purchase price of the asset, but we might also have, say, delivery costs, legal costs, and so on. And we discussed that in the previous video. So the next factor which is going to affect our depreciation is the estimated residual value of the asset, residual value. So what is this? Well, this is the estimated amount that the business could sell the asset for at the end of its useful life. So once the business is finished with the asset, again, let's look at this car example. We don't tend to buy a car that we're just going to use for the rest of our life. So if we're only going to use this car for, say, 10 years, well, what can we sell this car for in 10 years' time at the end of its useful life, i.e. when we stop using it? We are going to estimate this at the time that the asset is purchased. So we buy a brand new Mercedes for £200,000 today. On the day that we buy it, which is today, we're going to decide, okay, how much can I sell this for in, say, 10 years, 20 years? Whenever I'm going to stop using this, how much can I sell this for? What is the residual value? And again, this will depend on a number of factors in itself. So we can think about how much are we going to use this? Is it going to have wear and tear? And we looked at these factors in the previous video. Is this going to be obsolete? So is this car going to be very outdated in a few years? All of these are going to affect how much we can sell the asset for in the future. And so if we can only sell the asset for a little amount in the future, well, this is going to mean we're going to charge more depreciation to this asset because it's quickly reducing in value. So we need to quickly depreciate it with a high depreciation charge, of course. The final factor affecting our depreciation charge is going to be the estimated useful life of the asset, and we touched on this in this residual value point. It's all very well and good thinking, okay, how much are we going to get for this asset at the end of its useful life? But we also need to know, how long is this asset going to last? What is this useful life? How many years are we going to use this for? And our sort of textbook definition of useful life is the period where the business expects to be able to use the asset and thus generate income from it. So how long are we going to use our car for? If we're buying a machine, how long is this machine going to generate us income before either we're going to write it off and say the asset might be broken, or before we sell it, because once we've sold this asset, it's no longer going to be generating as income. And again, we can see that there are sort of, let's say, sub-factors within this. There are various things which will change the useful life of an asset. How well built is it? If we use the car example, we see cars from some countries, let's say Germany, are notorious for their reliability of their vehicles, so these cars may last longer, whereas cars from other countries, well, in the past we may have seen, say, Russian cars or even US cars, specifically, maybe not nowadays, but in the past, they would be seen as less reliable. They maybe don't last for as long and they have a shorter useful life. And if this asset isn't going to last as very long, well, we're going to need to depreciate it a lot, because the value of that asset is going to, well, it could potentially drop to zero in just a few years if this asset is not very well built and it's going to stop working very quickly. So there are the three main factors affecting the depreciation charge. We've got the cost of the asset, the estimated residual value of the asset, and the estimated useful life of the asset. And as we have said in this video, there are other, say, smaller factors which will affect the cost and the residual value and the useful life, but we're just going to group these all under these three main factors. The reason for this is we are then going to, once we know all these other sub-factors, we can then get a value and a number for the cost of the asset. How much did it cost us? The residual value, we're going to estimate how much we are going to sell our asset for, and we are going to get an estimate for how long we're going to be using this asset for. And once we have these three numbers, we can then calculate our depreciation charge. And in the next couple of videos, we're going to be looking at various methods for doing this, because it's all very well and good having these three numbers, but how do we then use them to get a depreciation value? Well, the answer is that there are different ways of doing this, and different assets will better benefit from different methods based on how the asset actually does depreciate in reality, but that is a topic for the next video. So I hope this video was useful. If it was, please do leave a like rating. Make sure to check out the accounting playlist for those next videos and the previous ones if you haven't seen them yet. And as always, subscribe to add some econ to your subscription feed.